The first time I saw Daniel Harris, I wasn't even supposed to be there. Life has a way of pulling you into places you never expect, and that evening was one of those moments. I had just finished a long, draining shift at the bookstore where I worked, the kind of shift that left your feet aching and your patience worn thin. I remember stepping out into the chilly autumn air, hugging my jacket tighter around me, when my friend Claire called and begged me to come with her to this small-town community event at the local art gallery. Normally, I would have said no. Social gatherings weren't really my thing. I liked quiet corners, the smell of paperbacks, and the comfort of routine. But Claire could be persuasive, and that night, maybe I was tired of saying no. That's where I saw him. Daniel wasn't standing out the way some people do when they want to be noticed. He wasn't loud or boastful. He was just there, leaning slightly against a wall, hands in his pockets, eyes quietly scanning a painting like it held all the answers in the world. Something about him pulled me in before I even realized what was happening. He looked like the kind of man who carried stories in his silence, the kind you wanted to unravel piece by piece. Claire, of course, noticed my gaze and nudged me. "You're staring," she whispered with a smirk. I roll my eyes, trying to brush it off. "I'm not," I lied. But I was. Later that evening, by what I told myself was coincidence but secretly hoped was fate, we ended up at the refreshment table at the same time. I reached for a cup of cider just as he did, and our fingers brushed. It was such a small, ordinary moment, but the spark that ran through me was anything but ordinary. "Sorry about that," he said, pulling back with an easy smile. His voice was warm, steady, the kind that makes you feel instantly at ease. "No, it's fine," I replied, feeling oddly breathless over something so simple. We introduced ourselves, and soon enough we were standing off to the side, talking. What surprised me wasn't just how easy he was to talk to, but how much I wanted to keep listening. Daniel wasn't just polite conversation. He was thoughtful, curious, and attentive in a way that made you feel seen. I found myself telling him things I hadn't planned to, little details about my life, my love for books, how I often felt like I lived more inside stories than in reality. To my relief, he didn't laugh or brush it off. Instead, he nodded thoughtfully. "There's nothing wrong with that," he said. "Stories keep us alive sometimes. They show us what's possible." I don't know why, but those words sank into me like an anchor. By the end of the night, Claire had disappeared somewhere into the crowd, but I barely noticed. Daniel and I had drifted into our own quiet corner of the gallery, losing track of time until the lights began to dim, signaling closing time. He walked me outside, and for a moment, the crisp night air wrapped around us, carrying a silence that wasn't awkward, but heavy with possibility. We didn't exchange numbers that night. I don't know why. Maybe we were both too cautious, too unsure. Maybe fate wanted to test us, to see if we'd cross paths again, without forcing it. And as much as I told myself it had just been a passing moment, I couldn't stop thinking about him in the days that followed. His voice, his words, that spark when our hands brushed, I carried it with me like a secret. Weeks later, fate intervened again. It was a rainy Saturday, the kind of day where customers trickled into the bookstore only to escape the weather. I was shelving a stack of novels when I heard the familiar chime of the door opening. I looked up, and there he was, Daniel Harris, shaking raindrops from his hair, scanning the aisles like he'd just wandered into the last place he expected to be. Our eyes met, and in that instant, I felt my breath catch. "You," he said, almost laughing in disbelief as he walked over. "I was starting to think I imagined you." I grinned, though my heart was pounding. "Well, I'm real. And apparently easy to find if you like bookstores." From that day on, things began to shift. Daniel started coming by more often, not in an overbearing way, but enough that it became clear he wasn't there just for books. Sometimes we'd talk for only a few minutes, sometimes for an hour if the store was quiet. He told me he was a carpenter, that he spent his days building furniture with his hands, shaping wood into something useful and beautiful. I told him I admired that, how he could take something raw and turn it into something lasting. "You do the same thing," he said one evening when I mentioned how much I loved recommending books to customers. I tilted my head. How do you figure? You take words on a page and turn them into experiences for people. You give them something to carry with them. That's not so different from what I do. I didn't know how to respond to that, but the way he said it made my chest feel warm. Before long, our conversations stretched beyond the bookstore. Coffee dates turned into long walks, and long walks turned into late-night phone calls that carried on until we both reluctantly admitted we needed to sleep. I told myself I'd keep my guard up, that I'd move slowly. My last relationship had ended painfully, leaving me wary of trusting too easily. But with Daniel, every wall I tried to build seemed to crumble without effort. And then came the night that would change everything. It wasn't planned. In fact, it started as the most ordinary evening. He'd come by the bookstore just before closing, offering to walk me home since it was late and the streets were quiet. We walked together under the glow of streetlights, the cool air carrying that familiar crispness of fall. Our conversation was easy, filled with laughter and small confessions, the kind you only share when you feel safe with someone. When we reached my apartment building, I should have said goodnight. That was the moment to stop, to keep things where they were, comfortable, safe, unthreatening. But I didn't. Instead, I hesitated. And he hesitated. And in that hesitation, the air between us shifted. He looked at me, his expression soft but searching, like he was asking for permission without words. I felt my heart hammering, every sensible thought in my head screaming at me to keep things simple. But something deeper, something quieter but stronger, whispered that this was a moment I couldn't walk away from. So I didn't stop. And neither did he.